In the summer of 1943, the Mediterranean sun burned white over the island of Sicily as thousands of Allied ships gathered on the horizon for Operation Husky, the invasion that would open the road into Fortress Europe. Among the American troops preparing to storm the beaches was a formation that looked, at first glance, like any other National Guard division from the American Southwest. They wore a red square patch with a golden Thunderbird blazing across it. They were the 45th Infantry Division, and before the war ended, that symbol would become a source of fear inside the German ranks and a testament to courage that transcended race, culture, and injustice. When the division was federalized in 1940, roughly 2,000 of its 9,500 soldiers were Native Americans drawn from more than 50 tribes, including Cherokee, Choctaw, Muscogee Creek, Kiowa, and Apache. Many of these men had grown up in communities that still felt the consequences of broken treaties, forced relocations, and assimilation policies that tried to erase language and tradition. Some came from states where Native Americans faced barriers to voting and open discrimination in daily life. Yet when war came, they enlisted in large numbers. They crossed an ocean to fight an ideology built on racial supremacy, even though equality at home remained incomplete. That contradiction would define their story. Originally, the 45th Division had worn a swastika on its shoulder patch, not as a symbol of hatred, but as an ancient Native American emblem of good fortune. When Adolf Hitler transformed that symbol into the banner of Nazism, the division made a deliberate break with the past. In 1939, they adopted a new insignia designed by a native artist, the Thunderbird, a powerful spiritual figure in many indigenous traditions. In those traditions, the Thunderbird creates thunder with the beating of its wings and lightning with the blinking of its eyes. It is a guardian spirit, a force of protection and justice. When the men of the 45th stepped onto Sicilian sand on July 10, 1943, that symbol began to take on a new meaning forged in battle. The Sicilian campaign was expected to be a tough but methodical advance. German and Italian forces had fortified the island with artillery, machine gun nests, and defensive lines carefully positioned to dominate the approaches. The heat was oppressive. Dust clung to uniforms and skin. The smell of diesel fuel, cordite, and blood hung in the air. Yet as the 45th pushed inland from Scogliti, they moved with a speed and adaptability that surprised German commanders. Entire enemy positions were flanked before officers fully grasped what had happened. Prisoners later expressed confusion at how American units appeared in places they considered impassable. For many of the Native American soldiers, terrain was not an obstacle but a language. They had grown up reading subtle changes in land and vegetation, understanding how ground, sun, and shadow could conceal or expose a moving figure. Those instincts, sharpened long before military training, translated into battlefield advantage. Within weeks, the division had advanced across vast stretches of Sicily, contributing to the collapse of Axis resistance on the island. The war did not slow when they crossed to mainland Italy. In September 1943, during brutal fighting near the village of Oliveto, a young officer named Ernest Childers distinguished himself in a way that would echo across both armies. A member of the Muscogee Creek Nation, Childers had learned marksmanship as a boy during the Great Depression, when every bullet used for hunting had to bring back food. On a cold morning, his battalion was pinned down by German machine gun fire. Mortar shells exploded around them, and one blast shattered bones in Childers' foot. Wounded and in intense pain, he refused evacuation. Crawling uphill with a small group of men, he eliminated snipers, destroyed machine gun positions, and captured an enemy mortar observer whose fire had been devastating his unit. For these actions, Childers received the Medal of Honor, becoming the first Native American of World War II to do so. German intelligence reports from this period began noting, with frustration, that some American units advanced even under heavy suppressive fire. The Thunderbirds were earning a reputation for refusing to break. That reputation hardened during the Anzio campaign in early 1944. The Allied landing behind German lines was intended to outflank entrenched defenses, but instead it resulted in a bloody stalemate. For 76 days, soldiers endured relentless shelling, sniper fire, cold rain, and mud-filled foxholes. Movement in daylight could mean instant death. It was here that the 45th became known as the Rock of Anzio. On February 22nd, as German forces launched a massive counterattack ordered by Hitler, another Thunderbird stepped forward. Jack Cleveland Montgomery, a Cherokee from Oklahoma, saw enemy infantry advancing in force toward his platoon. Acting without waiting for orders, he crawled forward alone, maneuvering close enough to throw grenades into enemy positions. He returned repeatedly for more ammunition, called in artillery support, and dismantled the attack, killing and capturing dozens. His audacity stunned even seasoned German officers. The idea that men whom Nazi ideology deemed inferior would attack so aggressively challenged the core assumptions of their racial doctrine. By May 1944, the stalemate at Anzio was breaking, but the German Caesar Line presented another formidable barrier of bunkers, minefields, and interlocking fire. During this phase of the fighting, Van Thomas Barfoot, a soldier of Choctaw heritage, volunteered to advance along a heavily defended flank. Crawling through a minefield under intense fire, he destroyed multiple machine gun positions with grenades and small arms. Later that same day, when German armor moved forward to counterattack, Barfoot disabled a tank with a bazooka shot and drove off the others. He then carried wounded comrades to safety across long stretches of exposed ground. His actions earned him the Medal of Honor and reinforced the growing perception among German troops that the Thunderbirds were exceptionally dangerous in close combat. In August 1944, the 45th conducted its fourth amphibious assault during Operation Dragoon, landing in southern France. By now, they were veterans hardened by Sicily, Salerno, and Anzio. They advanced rapidly through forests and mountainous terrain, adapting their tactics to local conditions. Patrols slipped behind enemy lines at night to gather intelligence and disrupt communications. German morale suffered not only from Allied strength but from uncertainty. The Thunderbirds seemed to appear unexpectedly, exploiting terrain and surprise. Over the course of the war in Europe, the division spent 511 days in continuous combat, one of the longest records of frontline service among U.S. divisions. In March 1945, the division crossed the Rhine and pushed into Bavaria. On April 29th, they reached the outskirts of a place that would forever mark their memory: the Dachau concentration camp. What they found defied comprehension. The stench of death hung in the air. Rail cars filled with corpses stood on the tracks. Survivors, skeletal and barely alive, emerged from barracks and compounds. Hardened soldiers who had endured artillery barrages and close combat wept openly. For Native American soldiers whose communities carried their own histories of displacement and suffering, the sight struck with particular force. The liberation of Dachau was not a moment of triumph but of shock, grief, and moral reckoning. In the chaos and fury of that day, some guards were killed amid the horror of what had been uncovered. The Thunderbirds had become witnesses to crimes that would define the moral stakes of the war. When the fighting in Europe ended in May 1945, the 45th Infantry Division had participated in 4 major amphibious invasions, fought for more than 500 days in continuous combat, and helped liberate one of the most notorious concentration camps in Nazi Germany. They had produced multiple Medal of Honor recipients among their Native American soldiers. Yet when many of these men returned home, they re-entered a society still grappling with segregation and discrimination. Some faced obstacles to voting. Others encountered exclusion in public life. The contrast was stark. Men who had helped defeat a regime built on racial supremacy were returning to a nation still struggling with its own inequalities. Despite this, their legacy endured. Military historians would later note the division's adaptability, resilience, and cohesion. The Thunderbird insignia, chosen to replace a corrupted symbol, became associated with liberation rather than oppression. The story of the 45th Infantry Division illustrates a profound truth about World War II. The fight against tyranny was carried forward not only by industrial power and strategic planning, but by individuals whose courage transcended the limitations imposed upon them. The German commanders who faced the Thunderbirds may have feared their aggression and skill, but what they truly confronted was something deeper, a determination rooted in identity, community, and a belief in justice. The thunder they created on the battlefields of Sicily, Italy, France, and Germany was not merely the sound of artillery. It was the echo of men proving that valor belongs to no single race, and that even those denied full equality at home could become decisive guardians of freedom abroad.